Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that everyone is being safe and that you've been safe over the last 48 hours. And I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe as well. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's a ton of stuff that has happened over the last 48 hours. As I'm sure you may know, there has been a ton of stuff that has happened in, of course, with regarding the KHERSON offensive and regarding Ukraine and Russia, as well as in Iraq and Baghdad. So we did do a little bit of a breaking news, a couple of different breaking news segments yesterday. We have a little bit more clarification as to these situations here today for you, and we're going to review the last 48 hours, the top news stories throughout the world. Why do we do this? Well, one, we will be able to provide you as the audience member an independent news source and a place to go that isn't the mainstream media, whether that be CNN, Fox, or any other mainstream media organizations you may be following. Another thing that we want to be able to do is we want to be able to do everything here for a good purpose. We never do super chats on this channel, and we're never pushing merchandising. 100% of everything that we do is for charity. If you go down into the description below, you're going to see a ton of different charity links. That is 100% of everything that we do. 80% or more of all the donations that the links below do receive actually go to their programs, meaning they go to help people. This is how we're able to be the news that gives back, and it only works thanks to you guys, the wonderful community, and the community that you guys have built here has been amazing. It's very informative. It's very overall just a good thing. You guys have built such an amazing thing here with us, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support that you've given us. So please go and check out those different links below. Check them all out. They're not just Ukraine. There are other locations throughout the world with other crises ongoing, and we're constantly looking for more. You're going to see a bunch of social media links down there. You can jump onto our Discord, join our community there, or any of the other communities, and send us a chat, send us a tweet, send us whatever, and with that, let us know, give us the link for an organization, especially in areas that we don't already cover, and give us a little bit of a summary for that. We're going to get that through our vetting process, and hopefully we'll get it added to the streams as well. Now, if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Because overall, one of the best ways that we can further this project and further do good throughout the world and be the news that gives back is by growing this community. The more people that are here, the more of an impact we will have. So please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Share us. Let us know. Let your friends know about us. Let your other communities know about us. The more people that come here, watch the news. Of course, you get that daily news update that everyone is kind of looking for. See what's happening inside of Ukraine and other regions throughout the world. But also, it's going to help us. More people that are here, the more people that will be donating, and eventually we want to be able to put fundraisers directly onto every single stream we do every single night. So thank you very much for the support you've already given us. We hope to get a lot more into the future as well. So thank you very much, guys. And as we get ready to move into the news here, I highly encourage you to ask questions. There is a ton of different stuff that's been happening. A lot of it is very complicated, to say the least. A lot of it has to do with geopolitics and the military, and luckily for you, I have a little bit of a military background on that. So if you wish to ask questions, please do so. There are probably plenty of other people that have the same question you do. And please make comments. I'm watching the chat. I will answer them to the best of my ability. To give you some background on myself, I was an 0352 in the United States Marine Corps, which is an anti-tank missileman. My subject matter expertise are in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. And I, of course, being an infantryman, I was fully cross-trained as a basic rifleman, and also being in a cat platoon, I was cross-trained as a machine gunner. So I have some experiences that would be able to assist you in trying to understand this. I will try to give my best. I will try to answer your questions to the very best of my ability. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll right into the news because there is plenty of it. So we jump down here, and of course, we begin with our special report in Ukraine, where we have a couple of different things happening up here in Kyiv. So first off, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Administration, Rafael Grossi, has begun his visit, as well as the rest of the visit of the team. The delegation is expected to be visiting the Zaporizhzhia power plant here in the upcoming days. Right now, it's rumored that they may be there tomorrow. We actually have a little bit of that here.
Mr. President, good to see you again.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
How
meet
are
you again. Good, good. And you safe, family?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, please. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Дуже дякую сьогодні приїзду місії МАГАТЕ в Україну. Напевно, на сьогодні це одне з пріоритетніших питань щодо безпеки України і світу через окупацію нашої Запорізької атомної електростанції російськими військовими і встановлення найвеликих ризиків щодо.
And so that's just him speaking with that international delegation for the International Atomic Energy Administration. And we are getting that from TPY XA. And as you continue down here, the reason for the visit is because there's been a lot of issues with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, mostly about a lot of conflicting information as to whether or not that it's being used as a military base by the Russians, who is shelling it, whether that be Russian or Ukrainian. There's quite a bit of evidence for it to be the Russians at this point, though that cannot be independently confirmed entirely. But there's a lot of stuff that's been going on that's putting the nuclear power plant at risk. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, or the ZNPP as it's most often referred to, is the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, and Ukraine being the country in which the Chernobyl accident occurred, Ukraine is fully aware of what could happen should the power grid be shut down, the generators not be able to be brought online, and a nuclear meltdown occur at that large of a facility. The fallout alone would cover roughly 90% of the country of Ukraine, as well as much of the surrounding areas of Europe, and it would be absolutely devastating to the entirety of Europe, essentially, if something were to happen to this facility. At this point, the plant was reportedly shelled 2 days ago. 3 distinct impacts at this point can be seen on the roof of the nuclear waste storage building. Russia, of course, is claiming that the Ukrainian armed forces did this. There's also military equipment that can be seen through this satellite footage, hiding around the facility. And we've seen both inside and outside the facility, where you're able to see a lot of very clearly marked with invasion markings military hardware being parked within the facility and even within the reactor generator room. But you can see very clearly those impact sites in and around this facility. It's a very clear satellite footage there for you. And as we continue here, these are some of the impacts that this facility did receive. Now, nuclear facilities are built to withstand certain amounts of kind of traumatic damage to them. So it's not something that, it's dangerous to do so, but this impact alone was reportedly, according to this source, 430 feet from the nuclear reactor number 2. And something else you can see here is underneath this bridge, you can see these military vehicles all lined up here at the power plant. The Russian military does control the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant at this point, and it's been very clear that they are there, and they are there in some kind of a rather large presence. Another update is that on child casualties. Unfortunately, this war affects everybody, and while 2/3 of Ukrainian children did flee the country, at this point there is still quite a significant number of them within Ukraine. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 379 Ukrainian children have died, 735 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region. And that comes to us from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. The Donetsk region is where the most significant amounts of fighting have been ongoing for the duration of the Donbass campaign. But at this point, that may be shifting at least a little bit. We jump over to Kharkiv, where Kharkiv every single day receives quite a significant amount of shelling. In fact, it's getting shelled, but not by your normal Grad rockets or your standard 2S3s. No, they are getting shelled with what is only, being able to be described as ballistic missiles. They are getting shelled with Iskander-M missile systems, and now even more frequently, S300 and S400 missiles. The S300 and S400 missile batteries were originally designed for air defense purposes. However, some of them, due to a running shortage at this point, or a suspected shortage at this point, of standard purpose-built ballistic missiles, they have been partially converted, some of their stockpiles, to surface-to-surface attacks, allowing them to give yet another but highly inaccurate ballistic missile system to use at long range to be able to strike the city of Kharkiv. We also have seen this in the areas such as Nikolaev and Kherson, where a large ammunition depot destroyed roughly about a month ago in Novokokhovka reportedly housed quite a quantity of these missiles, as the S-300 batteries were firing them on Nikolaev directly. We can see here in Kharkiv the amount of destruction here. It hit several administrations buildings, and at this point, that was yesterday's attack. Today's attack, we hear from, this is coming from Ole Subinov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration, and they say, quote, rocket attacks on the city of Kharkiv on August the 30th, 5 people were killed and 11 citizens were injured. Just take a look at some of the damage from these rocket attacks. This is from downtown. These are photos from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. This is their official Twitter, and these photos come to us from Ole Subinov, who apparently took these. These are some of these administration's buildings downtown, which were severely damaged in these strikes. And as we continue down here, we start to move into the Donbass. The Donbass is the meat and potatoes of this war. It's quite terrible what this is. The Donbass here is a totally different animal. If you may be a veteran yourself, such as me, and you may have even served in areas such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and many other locations throughout the globe during the global war on terror, you may think that you understand the level of destruction throughout the world and what modern warfare is like. I hate to break it to you, but you do not. This war is completely different than anything that has happened in the last 30 years. Throughout the entirety of the last 30 years, you can really see, like the breakup of Yugoslavia, many people compare that to some of the worst fighting within Europe. That doesn't come close. That was mostly infighting, and while extremely terrible and lots of genocide and ethnic cleansing on both sides when it came to the Balkans wars, this is two industrial powers killing each other, and essentially, and it's quite best described as an industrial scale. The destruction is much more akin to that of World War I than it truly is a 21st century war. There's been nothing like this in Europe in the last 80 years since the end of World War II, and it's something that many people vowed to never forget, and apparently that was forgotten. We can see down here in Slavyansk, where in fact the Red Cross was shelled in Slavyansk. Now, what makes this interesting is we've talked about to quite an extensive amount in bringing up the Geneva Conventions and the protocols that go along with them, as well as customary international humanitarian law, the things that Russia has broken. And it's not necessarily that Ukraine hasn't broken any laws of war. They most certainly have. That I will very readily be able to admit that no matter how much we may have a bias for Ukraine, we can admit that Ukrainians have conducted some kind of war crimes. It's the scale of those war crimes that is so tremendous, that is so horrendous even, and it's insane. And the thing about this is shelling a city. Okay, we've seen it time and time again. There's a scorched tactic. It's what Russia does. The International Committee of the Red Cross is the only humanitarian organization by name stated in the Geneva Conventions. It's the only organization by name stated in the Geneva Conventions. If there is a most blatant war crime, it is this one. This organization by name has been labeled time and time and time again. if you read through the Geneva Conventions, one, you will be extremely bored, and two, you will see how they talk about, like the internet, like the Committee of the Red Cross, like the Red Cross, like the Red Cross. The Red Cross are non-combatants. Non-combatants, such as the Red Cross, over and over and over and over and over again. And over again. There's no other organization that could be so clearly defined as the Red Cross, as a non-combatant humanitarian organization within the Geneva Conventions, as the Red Cross. They're the only ones by name. And they were shelled. And this is confirmed by the Red Cross. This is coming from the Red Cross themselves, the International Committee of the Red Cross inside of Ukraine. They said, we strongly condemn the attack on the base of the Red Cross Ukraine evacuation team in Slavyansk, Ukraine. The International Committee of the Red Cross stands with the Red Cross Ukraine to reaffirm the importance of protecting civilians, humanitarians, and health workers and facilities. It's not like it's not like this area was just in there. It's not like they were in an area evacuating people and happened to get caught in the crossfire. This is their base. This is what their base of operations in this area. It's clearly labeled. Their vehicles are clearly labeled. There's no mistaking a Red Cross vehicle. There's nothing like it in the world. Okay? There just isn't. And they shelled it. They shelled the buildings that they were using. They shelled their vehicles. We do not know about any casualties at this point, but if there's clearly something that's not a target, it's this. It's this one. No matter how poor of a justification any of the others can be, there is no justification for this. And as we kind of continue down here, let's take a look here. Sideburn says, I wish an ally could join the fight in Ukraine. You know, I've thought about that, and there's a lot of ways you could go with that. And the thing is that the reality of warfare in the 21st century, and having such an insane ability to destroy ourselves, is that's all warfare is. Is just an ever evolving ability to destroy yourself. War is tremendously terrible. And the level of destruction in Ukraine does not even compare to the ramifications of additional countries jumping into the fight. Now, you see where situations can go better because of other countries and organizations, at coalitions going into a location. The UN peacekeeping efforts globally, like that's generally speaking, that usually helps to stabilize an area. But you also see where coalition activities end up going poorly and end up having quite long-standing ramifications that weren't intended to help, or they weren't intended to end up in that way. Syria, it can arguably be called, kind of a weird geopolitical situation where coalition interventions on two opposing sides, one being the Russians and the other one's being an international coalition against the Islamic State, really kind of makes the war in Syria, one, more deadly, and two, it makes it a lot more complicated and also puts a lot more countries at risk of heightened tensions. Countries that are much more industrialized and are much more capable of fighting large-scale wars in a global stage. So that's an argument you could definitely make about Syria, 100%. And I spent quite a amount of time there. I spent 4.5 months in Syria. So, I mean, while I like to think I was there and I did a lot of good things, like I made a lot of Syrian children feel safe because the Islamic State wasn't about to attack us when we were there. But on the big scale of things, on the larger strategic scale, which I'm not very well versed at, but it really does put a lot of risk into play there. And you can say that about a lot of regions. Yugoslavia, for instance, NATO involvement in that, even though it was at the request and was approved through the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council, including the Russian Federation. That one had some unforeseen ramifications. In fact, NATO is still in the Balkans. They are located in Kosovo. In fact, they will be the ones defending Kosovo if Serbia continues to and actually does end up attacking Kosovo. So it's a lot of ramifications that weren't intended that can either help or hinder a situation. Ukraine could very easily, while they are getting a lot of help with materials and training and intelligence and whatever else, them expanding the war does not do good for anybody, and whether that be Russia, whether that be NATO, whether that be a third party. Russia, while it seems incompetent, doesn't mean it's reached the end of its leash yet. In fact, they haven't even mobilized their forces entirely. So that's a pretty sticky question. Do you risk it or do you not? And I think that given the circumstances, the nuclear arsenals in play and everything else, which, as much as we hate to admit it, we have to take into account, the danger overall of involving another country into this conflict in a kinetic way only opens the door for worse situations to come that could lead to quite a terrible overall living standard, if you will. So that's kind of my response to that. As we continue down here, we get our daily Donetsk updates. These come 24 hours after the fact from Pavlo Krylenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. And Pavlo Krylenko gave us an update yesterday regarding what occurred on the 28th. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on the 28th. 8 people were killed, 7 citizens were injured. And then today, they give us an update as to yesterday's information. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on August 29th. 2 people were killed and 4 citizens were injured. Once again, heavy amounts of shelling within this region. You're seeing precursor bombardments in Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. And at this point, there's quite a bit of shelling in the areas of Bakhmut, Toretsk. You're talking about Solidar, Siversk. All of these are getting pretty heavily shelled as Russian forces are trying to they have a large concentration of forces up here, and they are making very slow gains, but we're also seeing a lot of pushback. Don Sekiter, I'm sorry if I screw up your name, by the way, says, I'm happy with the strat so far. I'd like even more military aid, the tougher sanctions, though. I think a lot of people can do that, but you have to understand countries require... different countries require different things, and that, the United States, for instance, they must keep a stockpile. We cannot allow the United States, I don't know the specifics on this, like that's way above me, and it's probably highly classified, but the United States maintains a stockpile limit. They say this is an overage. Usually it's about a 10% overage is what we maintained, at least with an armory standpoint. So I'm probably guessing that it's probably very similar on a large scale. That's kind of the mentality for the military, a 10% overage or whatever you need to replenish combat losses and for, fluctuations. But they say, okay, we cannot go below, this point, basically. And the United States is drawing down its supplies from that 10% overage, and then the U.S. has to maintain a certain amount before it says, okay, we can no longer complete mission, we can no longer fight prolonged conflict on our own if need be. So that's why we are not seeing as much military aid as you'd like. And a lot of this stuff, the U.S. military-industrial complex is not as built up as it was. It's not 1943, where 97% of everything's going to the military. It's 2022. The United States hasn't had to fight a long, prolonged war in quite the same fashion as, say, a World War II campaign would take, and therefore we just don't have that capacity at this point. And so we just aren't going to. Let's see here. Seems to be a lot of stuff going on. Rooster Sideburn says, more global involvement, period. The war is more or less silent about this war. I think it's actually pretty vocal about this war. Much so, if you want silence, just look at what happened in 2014. Let's see. What's the difference? Or Delta Aviation is asking, what's the difference between an F-35A and a Lightning II? The F-35 is the Lightning II. The original Lightning essentially was actually, I want to say, the Thunderbolt. Yeah. So the P-47, the P-47 Lightning was the original, if I'm not mistaken there. I wasn't an aviator. I was an infantryman. I called in aviators, so I hope that they would know their aircraft, because I really didn't need to, outside of going, yeah, that's a Russian jet. Yeah, that's an American jet. And then that was about all I needed to know. Moving on here, we actually have a little bit of cool humanitarian news down here. This is coming from the United Nations the United Nations and the World Health Organization inside of Ukraine. And this is vital humanitarian aid was being brought into Donetsk here, which is really with the side. It lies along a key axis of Russian advance here as it runs along. Basically, there's a route here. It's a main MSR, or main supply route, that runs all the way through Donetsk and all the way up to Kramatorsk and up past Slavyansk. So it's a very key, vital roadway for the Russians. It also has to run through Allanivka and many other key locations within the Donbass, and specifically the Donetsk region. And these areas, Donetsk especially, has been under quite a significant amount of shelling. Basically, nothing works there. There's no gas. There's no electricity. There's no nothing. And they're bringing in a lot of humanitarian aid, even though the Russians are right outside. They're right on the doorstep of these regions. Keep in mind that these battle lines are not exact. These lines on the map, these are not exact whatsoever. This is to give you a general idea of what the situation on the ground is, but these are constantly moving and fluctuating, and we're not on the we're not on the perfect level of we know exactly where Ukrainian lines are or Russian lines and exactly what they've taken. We're going off of independent reports here, and that's how we adjust our map, is as we get evidence of something shifting or something moving along the lines. But we can go ahead and take a look here. You can see that humanitarian aid that's getting rolled into. Once again, joint statement, WHO and Ukraine and the UN bringing in a lot of that humanitarian aid. So fantastic to see that more people are getting the aid that they need, and that more people are going to be able to hopefully survive in these pretty terrible areas, or terrible conflict areas. The sad truth is that a lot of the populations within these areas did decide to stay, and stayed too long in the cases of many that were trying to flee. The situation is that they are people that thought they had seen war. They saw and lived through the fighting between the separatists and the Ukrainian army since 2014. However, they don't understand the true scale of this until it hit them in the face, and that's unfortunately how a lot of people have had to learn this, and unfortunately not as many people evacuated as people had hoped for. As we continue moving further south, we move over here to Allanivka. Allanivka is being used as a detention facility, mostly for the survivors of the Azovstal. There's over 1,000 of them. Several of them have been taken back to Moscow. But what this truly is a concentration camp. This is the closest thing I can possibly describe to a concentration camp, is a filtration camp or filtration point system, which was heavily used in the 1990s and early 2000s during the First and the Second Chechen War, and we see it used heavily here inside of Ukraine. There are some camps, such as the one over by Bezymie, which is suspected of being able to hold up to 100,000 Ukrainians. However, this is one of the defenders of the Azovstal. He was taken, he had his images taken both when he surrendered as well as propaganda footage now, and you can see just the heavy toll that just 100 days in captivity has taken on them. This is the same person. The same person. The Azovstal, where they spent months fighting and starving. 100 days of captivity. "100 days of captivity." Do you know what photo this brings to mind for me? This photo is of Buchenwald in 1945. This is the liberation of the Buchenwald concentration camp. Look at their faces. This is what this reminds me of. The faces are the same. It's a concentration camp. A filtration camp is a concentration camp. And there's nothing you can tell me at this point in the war to change my mind. I see no difference between those two sets of photographs. I see none. A couple more questions coming in here. Delta Aviation asks, if Russia captures the clue of the Javelin, is that bad? Well, yes and no. It depends if it's in working condition and if they have the batteries to run it. And secondly, it depends on, did they bust out the front sight on it? If we were expecting to be captured or killed during an engagement, or we thought we were going to be overrun, or our orders were to destroy the main housing group of the clue and the focal lenses on the clue in order to render them unusable. So it depends. If they capture a clue and a working Javelin, yes and no. China has already developed something kind of similar, but that just because you know how the clue works and how it'll lock on to something and all of that, it doesn't necessarily mean you know how the Javelin itself works. And Russia doesn't have the capability to produce them even if they found out how to. And China already has their own version. So that's, yeah. But anyway, so that's the concentration camp in Allanivka. Jump down here to Mariuple, where arguably if you died during the Battle of Mariuple, you were better off. Because to have survived the Battle of Mariuple is a terrible, terrible fate. It is a fate worse than death itself. As we can see here, hunger riots have finally begun in Mariuple. These people have not really had anything to eat, realistically, for weeks at a time. They have no clean drinking water. They are starving. They are dying of thirst. They are dying because they have no medication. They are dying from sickness such as cholera. They have no homes. They have no electricity, no running water, no sanitation. They are in a city that is littered and covered in rubble and dead bodies trapped underneath those rubbles that are slowly but surely decomposing into puddles that happen to now seep into the drinking water that they scrape up from shell craters. They have no homes. They have no safety. There is no help coming for them. The Red Cross, which, or at least the Russian version of it, has failed to bring enough food for everyone in the neighborhoods here in Mariupol. This has caused some public outrage, and this ended up leading the Red Cross, at least whatever the humanitarian organization it is, bringing in stuff to Mariupol, to refuse to give any aid to anyone at all, and they left with all of the rest of the humanitarian aid supplies in pretty short order. And now what we're seeing is food riots as a result.
Красный Крест прекратил выдачу из-за того, что типа люди не могут, а все хотят получить паёк и не могут. Прекратил выдачу. Сказали, будут уезжать, чтобы люди не стояли.
But you know what the Russians did bring? They brought Russian flags, and they're teaching kids how to use weapons now. Unbelievable. Yep. They already started their child military program inside of Mariuple and in Zaporizhia. And here they are teaching children how to fire AK-74s. They can't bring food to them, but they'll teach their children how to fire AKs. As we move down here start moving into the south of Ukraine here, what we see is more successful strikes over the last couple of days. Once again, a lot of this information is stuff that's coming out 24 hours after the fact, so these statements were released both yesterday and today. And what we see here is, quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian anti-aircraft missile and gun complex of Pantsir 1, a 120mm self-propelled mortar system, the 2S9 DONETSK, and an enemy electronic warfare station in the south of Ukraine on August the 28th. They furthered this up today with, quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 11 Russian 152mm self-propelled howitzer, 2 A-65 Mista Bs, a 152mm Hull self-propelled gun, the Hyacinth S, and a 120mm self-propelled mortar system, the 2S9 DONETSK, a 152mm self-propelled howitzer, 2 S19 Mista S, and an enemy ammunition depot in the settlements of Berislav, Yosukipilia, and Allanivka in the Kherson region on August the 29th. And that's all coming from Operational Command South. What we see here is our scoot and shoots. These are M777 artillery batteries. They are conducting what we would call a scoot and shoot. What this does is it counteracts counter battery fire. So Russian artillery, one, they have to get within much closer range. On average, the Ukrainian artillery NATO artillery is outranging, depending on the variant or depending on the artillery system and the round type. They're outranging Russian artillery by anywhere from 5 to up to 45 kilometers. Okay, so quite an extensive shoot that they can do. The Russians have to get within much closer range. And now what we're seeing here is the Ukrainians, while they simply don't have the volume Russia does, Russia has about 10 times as much artillery as Ukraine is fielding right now. What the Ukrainians do have is high mobility, and they're using that to their advantage. They are setting up their artillery, they lay down the stakes, they set up the guns, they shoot, they displace their artillery guns, they pack everything up, and they move. And that is what is ongoing here. They can pack up an entire M777 battery in 80 seconds, not even letting time pass long enough for Russian artillery to counter battery them effectively. They won't even be in the area. They'll be well down the road and probably setting up their next shooting location. You can see some of that here. It is going to be muted, and so you guys can see some of that here for you, but it does have some copyright music. But 80 seconds to take down this entire artillery gun. You can still see the smoke from when they just fired this thing. And the cool thing is that these artillery guns are built for this kind of thing. This is exactly the purpose. This is exactly the purpose that they have behind them. Is even the front part of this. There's a little tip on the end of the muzzle there. That's because it tows from the front. You literally pull it into the place you want to shoot it, unhook it, and you can immediately start raising the gun barrel and lay out the stakes so that way you can line up your sights, and it's good to go. You're ready to shoot. And it's pretty impressive. And this is something that gun teams train to do. The Demise FPS says they have gotten very efficient with M777As. Yeah, they have, and we know that they have other variants too. But yeah, they're very efficient with these artillery systems. I mean, their lives depend on it, and they know that. They're very well aware of what's happening. What he's doing there, that's the sight for it. You want to keep the sight separate off the weapon system. That goes for mortars too. Oh crap! Delta Aviation says we have 150 subscribers now. Thank you very much, guys. That is awesome. That's crazy to me. I had no idea that we would even get to this point. So, so yeah, with 150 subscribers, huh? Wow, that's a lot. The thing with this is, we're not making money off of any of this, and it's. I mean, we're not making any, I mean, I work a full-time job. Most of the staff here works full-time because we want everything here to be all about charities. And we really don't care about what other individuals or other groups say about us or anything else. It's all about trying to help the people that are affected by these. Because at the end of the day, I spent 2 tours overseas, 2 tours in the Middle East, and I saw some pretty terrible things. And there's nothing that made me feel better in every morning I'm standing post in Syria. And there's nothing that made me feel better that at 9:30 in the morning, a group of kids would come out and they would play a game of soccer because they didn't have to worry about IEDs. And I've wanted to do that kind of thing for the rest of my life. I want to have that kind of an impact on people. I want people's lives that even they live in the worst kind of a situation to do even better. And I want to have a chance to put fundraisers on every single stream we do. And until that point, we're always going to have stuff inside of the description. The subscribers help, and I really can't thank you guys enough. But as long as these organizations are getting the support they need, then I just appreciate that. So thank you guys very much for 150 subscribers, and I hope that we can hopefully go much further than that. And with that, we're going to continue on with the news. But thank you guys very much. I really do appreciate it. And if you guys can't support the organizations, let your friends know about us and just keep sharing us. The more people that are here, the more of an impact we'll have as a community. And I can't think of a better thing to do this for. I really can't. As we continue on over here, I almost missed it. So this is the same guys. This is their M777 in action. I almost missed this. Oh, and it was deleted. So I guess we're gonna go ahead and move on. As we move over here, fancy toys. A couple of Ukrainian pilots, MiG-29 pilots, MiG-29 Fulcrum, which is the main fighter aircraft in the Ukrainian arsenal, showed off their brand new toys. These are the fancy AGM-88s you hear so much about. There's a lot of variants regarding the AGM-88, and these appear to be some of the older variants that they have been getting. Some of the older stuff from the stockpile, not as effective as some of the newer stuff that other NATO countries are fielding, but still quite a different thing. Ukraine doesn't have anything like this, and so it's pretty awesome to kind of see that kind of stuff being employed and being given to them to expand their capabilities. Tanks, rockets, missiles, no matter what it is, everything in the end of the day is a tool in the toolbox, and you got to pick the right tool for the job. And as long as you're picking the right tool for the job and you're using it the way it's intended to, more than 9 times out of 10, as long as you know what you're doing with it, you're going to be successful. Ukraine has a tool in the toolbox for a certain situation. If they use it, then bam, they're going to be successful with it. It's going to have an impact in the battlefield. We already see this as Russian radar sites are being destroyed throughout Ukraine, and as long as that's what it's being done for, then it works. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. Take a look. Of course, this has copyright music. squeeze myself down here a little bit. So this is a Ukrainian pilot, and he's actually dedicated to this to one of the pilots that was shot down on March the 9th. And you can see these two fulcrums. This is a flight. The flight of ships, and they are out and keeping and they're out and they're conducting operations. You can see them. He's put kind of a compilation together, which is really cool to see, of life inside of a pilot's cockpit. And you can see that a lot of stuff inside, if you take a look at kind of like his instrument panel and everything, you can see that a lot of his instruments, they're analog. They're not like, say, the F-18 or the F-16 or the F-35. These are very different setups inside the aircraft. These are older. These are Soviet-era aircraft that have been modernized to an extent, but they're very analog, as everything in Russia is. And that's kind of what makes it difficult to just give Ukrainian pilots F-16s and say, here, have fun. It's that muscle memory. It's knowing what they need to look for. It's that training. That's the life or death difference in these aircraft, and you can't afford to lose, an aircraft, especially an F-16, if you were to give it to Ukraine. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. But quite impressive, quite cool to see. Once again, this is from his footage. You can see that AGM-88 coming out the side there. So that's probably going to be ruining someone's day. A little bit of different news out of Ukraine. So something that a lot of people have pointed out is that Ukraine has a lot of issues, especially when they're kind of on the fence when it comes to whether or not Ukraine should be part of the European Union. And why did Ukraine get accepted, but a country like Georgia did not? And a lot of it's based off of good faith efforts. And the way to best describe this is you don't hear about Georgia doing anti-corruption. They have a lot of problems with oligarchy still, which is a very Russian thing. Oligarchs became a thing as people from the Soviet Union who were rich and powerful within the Soviet Union retained their power. And their money and everything else, it didn't just collapse with the Soviet Union. They just kind of rolled over, and the now party members of the Soviet Union are now just called oligarchs. And that was an issue inside of Ukraine, and that was also an issue inside of Georgia. Well, inside of Ukraine, since 2014, they have been, since the Maidan Revolution in 2014, there's been a lot of work done to improve the situation with corruption. And while everyone understands it's still an issue, there are still issues with Ukraine, but there isn't a country that doesn't have an issue. And you can see that happening here where they're doing that good faith effort. They're actually trying to do something where Georgia, you're not really seeing that happening, really. And that's because top officials inside the Zaporizhzhia Oblast are actually under investigation by the SBU, which is the Ukrainian service, like their FBI essentially. And they are currently under investigation here in the Zaporizhzhia region for misappropriating humanitarian aid and humanitarian aid funds. So this is something we're actually getting from the SBU themselves. This is their official Twitter, and this is something that they have officially released. You can see these are reportedly money that they've been taking from bribes. Most of the time when you see this, it's in American currency because it retains its value quite significantly. You see a pistol, and you're seeing these are SBU officials in here. And you can see all this humanitarian aid that's been sent over to a warehouse kind of independently of where it normally would be, that they're saying that this stuff has been misappropriated. This stuff's getting auctioned off and going into the pockets of whatever Ukrainian officials are involved in this situation. They haven't released too many details, obviously probably for a lot of reasons, but at this point we do know that Ukraine is trying to crack down on some of the corruption issues that they're having as a result of this. And I think it's good to see that. I think it's good to see that good faith effort on the part of Ukraine, and really gives that backing to what, say, Ursula von der Leyen was saying. There are still issues that Ukraine must overcome, but there has been a lot of good faith effort to try and overcome them to allow them to become a member of the European Union. So hopefully we continue to see stuff like that ongoing. And another, on going back a little bit more into the war here, we see that 207 people are reportedly still in captivity by the Russian Federation. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian occupiers have kidnapped 485 Ukrainian citizens in the Zaporizhzhia region. 207 Ukrainians are still being held in captivity. That's coming from the press service of the Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration. Ooh, an interesting question that that I actually can talk quite a lot about. Delta Aviation has asked an interesting question about Russian military hardware and former Soviet hardware, technically. And that question is, what's the difference between a T-72 and a T-90A? Quite a bit. If you look at the T-Series tanks independently, there aren't a lot of changes between each of them. Generally speaking, there's not a lot of changes between each variant. You know, the T-62 versus the T-64, one has really the main difference is the T-62 is milled road wheels on them, and the T-64 is stamped road wheels. The difference between the T-72 and the T-90, though, because there's a variant in between, you're going to see much more of a gap. And the T-72 has had quite a bit of upgrades done to them, at least the ones that we saw very early on in the war. They still have some that have these upgrades, but it's not nearly that extent. And the difference is a couple of different factors. One, the T-72's electronics, basically suite inside of it is obviously older, and it also has a little bit less range, technically speaking. They run at about 3,500 meters max effective range with the main gun. The T-90 can actually hit about 4 kilometers, which is the supposed range of the T-72. Secondly, they have a much better electronic suite inside of them, which is not saying a lot because most of Russian equipment is analog. They're kind of on that mentality of technology fails, and therefore it's just better to keep it simple and keep everything, hardwired into the system. It's not like it's not highly electronic. The other thing is they have what's called the Arena CAS, or it stands for the Arena Close-In Air Defense System. This is meant to detect and basically fire a giant shotgun to destroy incoming projectiles headed for the tank. At this point, we haven't seen any real capability come from the Arena CAS. It really hasn't proven any kind of effectiveness, whether that's because of poor logistics to make these things just not capable, whether we're just not seeing it. It doesn't matter. It's just what it's kind of sitting at, and then the T-90 also is also a little bit faster with its auto rotating gun, or its auto loading carousel, I should say. Another thing that the T-90 can do that the T-72 cannot do is you can laser a T-72. You can use a laser rangefinder on a T-72. You cannot on a T-90. I have no problem telling this about Russian capabilities because I don't care what the Russians think of me after this. The T-90 has this capability where if you hit it with a laser, that laser will be detected by the sensors on the vehicle. Reportedly, keep in mind we've thought a lot of things about the Russians, will be detected by the sensors on the T-90 tank. What ends up happening is the main tank gun will reportedly rotate to the point of origin of that laser. It will back azimuth that laser to its point of origin. It will automatically load with the auto rotating carousel a 120 millimeter round. It'll fire that round to the point of origin. It'll automatically fire it on 15 degrees on either side of that round. And keep in mind, it can fire 9 rounds a minute. It will fire a round on 15 degrees either side of the point of origin to prevent the crew from escaping. That's reportedly something the T-90 can do. Once again, much like the Arena CAS, haven't seen any effectiveness at it. They also have better weather gauges, but that's about it. The T-90 is a different beast in general, but in this war, we haven't seen any of the effective capability of them. So, not a whole lot in total honesty. At this point, whatever thoughts we had before, we can probably scrap and throw out the window and just kind of go back to the drawing board on what we think and what we know the T-90 can and cannot do. We jump down here to Enhadar. And what we see is 10 people were reportedly injured in shelling. Quote, rocket attacks on the city of Enhadar in the Zaporizhzhia region on August the 29th. 10 people were injured. Two injured victims are in serious condition. Local private autos were damaged. So local private automobiles were damaged. That's coming from Dmytro Orlov, who is the mayor of Enhadar. We jump down here to Mariuple, where we see that explosions are currently rocking the city of Mariuple. While KHERSON has caught most of the attention of the world over the last 24 hours, the other strikes were occurring in areas such as Mariuple that were ongoing throughout Monday, and that's something that we can actually see here. We do have a video of that. Take a look. And that allows us to finally, with the main topic of the night, roll into the Kherson Oblast. And man, is there a lot to cover regarding Kherson. Kherson has seen an immense amount of fighting, an immense amount of development. The Ukrainian forces appear to have launched a counteroffensive in the Kherson Oblast. There is some stuff kind of going around regarding operational security, and with that due diligence, I will say that most of the stuff we have at this point is stuff that was reported initially yesterday before a lot of operational security stuff came out regarding it. And so a lot of this stuff is a little bit older, and things have definitely developed since, but the amount of information coming out has definitely quieted down as a result of a lot of these kind of people sharing, hey, operational security, kind of keep it quiet right now. So like we saw earlier on, as much as we want to hear about it, we aren't. But what we're seeing is quite an amount of stuff. The first thing we can see, and I'm going to skip a couple of these points down here in the south because it'll make sense in order. What we see here is that up along the Inhulets River, which is this river that runs right along here, the Inhulets River, there was a point near Davidiv Breed, which is located right here, where the Ukrainian forces apparently exploited a gap in the Russian lines. This is something that takes a lot longer than most people think of to find a gap in somebody's line. What it takes, some. And the thing is that there was reportedly the DPRs, or the Donetsk People's Republic's 109th MRR regiments, basically their motorized rifle regiment, was located near Davidid Breed. It's a conscriptual motorized or mechanized rifle regiment, and they were holding the line here. They were assisted by, we do not know the brigade that they were assisted by, but a brigade of the VDV, or the Russian paratroopers, that the Russian paratroopers were sat reportedly along their flank. And after an immense amount of shelling the night before, the VDV actually broke contact and they routed. They abandoned the 109th MRR brigade here in Davidid. And what ended up happening is the Ukrainians then launched a counteroffensive in this area. The 109th Mechanized Rifle Regiment was unable to actually hold the line and broke into a full retreat, or a full rout, where many of their forces were either captured, killed, or ended up returning back to deeper defensive lines, as the Russians are currently defending in depth right here. And we actually have a video. This is the counteroffensive perspective. This is from what is reportedly a Russian soldier with the 109th Mechanized Rifle Regiment during this counteroffensive. This has come out. We cannot confirm independently that this is in fact the true source, but this is what we're seeing. This would appear to be the Russian perspective as to what's going on in the Kherson Oblast. If you happen to be there at the time the Ukrainians finally broke the Russian back here in Kherson. Take a look.
Европы хуярят со всего, что только можно. Прорвали первую линию обороны. Хуярят с танков, авиации, артиллерии. 29 августа.
Needless to say, if you're a part of the separatists or you're Russian right now and you're in Kherson, life sucks, and life sucks pretty bad. I do not know if this man lived or died, nor do I honestly care, but that is kind of the situation that we're seeing here. It's not good. If you were in the Russians, it sucks. So this was before these happened, before all of this has happened. Keep in mind, all night there's been constant shelling of the lines in the Kherson region. Okay, we do know the Ukrainians broke through near Davidi Brid, okay, along the Inhulets River, and they made a push. We do not know where their lines have stopped and where they or what's happening exactly at this point. It's a lot of conflicting and very fragmented information that we're trying to put together. And we were trying to put it together a little bit yesterday, but it was a little bit, obviously, I believe I said yesterday in one of the breaking news reports that Mariuple had been recaptured. That was not true. I want to make that very openly clear. That's not true. Mariuple is very far behind the lines, but yeah, so that's kind of what we're seeing here. But as we move down here, according to the Operational Command South, this is Vladislav Nazorov, who is the spokesman for Operational Command South. He stated today, quote, on August 30th, the armed forces of Ukraine fired missiles at 3 strategically important for Russian aggressors' bridges, the Antonovsky, its railway section, and the Durivsky in the Kherson region. Moreover, the Ukrainian army destroyed an enemy S300 anti-aircraft missile system, or SAM battery, and 5 Russian anti-tank missile systems. So that's kind of what we're seeing. You're hearing from them as of today. Much more regarding those more official reports. Mariuple, apparently their another ammunition depot was destroyed. Their air defense systems are pretty much non-existent at this point on the north side of the Dnipro River. Take a look.
Полосочка длинная. Полетела, по-моему, сюда. Полос.
Delta Aviation 23 asked, will the T-14, which is the T-14 Armada, ever enter service or have sanctions prevented this? The T-14 probably was never going to enter service to begin with. It has an immense amount of reliability issues from at least our understanding. And that's coming from the time when I was having to study it. We were understanding that it wasn't going to be... that's why you haven't seen it fielded. It has too many reliability issues. It's much more of a detriment than a help. And to the point that they're pulling T-62s and putting them in service before they're pulling the T-14s. So they're much more of a parade thing. They're much more of kind of a... It's much more of a prestige thing than it is actually useful. And that's kind of what you're seeing from the T-14. It's also its design seems to be rather impractical in tank design, but it also hasn't faced any kind of combat rigors to tell us whether or not it'd actually be good or not. But our understanding is it breaks down quite often. It has an underpowered motor for the amount of armor that they're putting onto it, and the armor really isn't as effective as some have led it to be believed. Some are even claiming it still has rolled homogeneous steel instead of kind of a steel and ceramic compound mixture, kind of like the Abrams does. But that's it's not really, we don't know. I mean, it's just not enough information. I'm sure somebody way above me probably knows something more about the T-90 or the T-14, sorry, Armada, but at least at my level, never really had to worry about it, and I never expected it. My worry was T-72s and T-80s, T-90s, T-55s sometimes, but most of those were destroyed during the war, the First and the Second Gulf War, so I didn't really have to worry about those either. As we jump down here to Novokhovka, another ammunition depot apparently is cooking off tonight. This is coming from a Ukrainian local. Quote, the local market is the devil's asshole right now.
месте рынка жопа дьявола. Я ебу в рот. Ой, бля. Не рынок будет, я не знаю. Ракета. Ой, башут ракеты, нихуя себе! Пизда, рынка нема нихуя! Там просто жопа дьявола! На месте рынка жопа дьявола! Нихуя себе! Ох, ебать! Ебануться! Ого! Ох, ебать! Ебать! Я вижу. Пизда! Я сказал пизда! Гори нахуй!
Damn. That's a hell of an explosion. Yeah. Let's see. Let's go through the comments here real quick. Demise FPS, another saltpeter incident. Yeah, I know, right? They just keep putting saltpeter everywhere. I don't understand it. This is the person recording it. It lifted his mood. Yeah, it certainly lifted his mood, and it also lifted the outside of his house. I'd be smoking a cigarette too on the porch, going, "Wow, that's pretty crazy. That's wild." This guy's just out having a cigarette, just watching the fireworks. Riley says, "Because baby, you're a firework." Yep. So nice of Xenocide 21. So nice of Russia to give them a nice show. I know, right? But hey, man, if you're gonna put that many fireworks someplace, you might as well use them, right? I mean, what time to celebrate? But yeah, that's a quite impressive fireworks display they got there in Novikhovka. For those that don't know, Novikhovka, down here by the markets, they had an entire warehouse of ammunition. And where is this video from? That's from Novikhovka, Rooster. And so Novikhovka, for those that don't get the saltpeter reference, Novikhovka had a huge explosion. We actually have it here on stream that we ended up covering when it happened. There's a huge ammunition depot here in Novikhovka. Probably the biggest one of the war, I would say, that was destroyed. And is that Russian-occupied territory? Yes, very much so. It's very deep inside Russian-occupied territory. But when this blew up, they blamed the Ukrainians and said that they had used HIMARS to strike saltpeter, which is a type of fertilizer, and it exploded. The problem is that saltpeter doesn't explode. You need a reducing agent for it to be explosive. It's not like ammonium nitrate. And they actually went back, I think it was like 72 hours later, and their next statement about the explosion in Novikhovka was that it was that they had ammonium nitrate just sitting. And then somebody actually went out to the location. They went out after all this stuff is done exploding. There's 152 millimeter shell casings just everywhere. And 152 millimeter shell casings, the standard Russian Soviet style, artillery shell. And I was like, damn, they must have a lot of 152 millimeter shells of saltpeter lying around. That's not the only thing over here. This is Tavrisk, or sorry, Tavrisk, and another ammunition depot hit in Tavrisk. Yeah, so there's another one. And then we continue over here. Of course, the Antonovsky Bridge was struck once again. This is coming from a south. So this is coming from Talia Gumunyuk, who is the head of the press center for the South Operative Command. All main transport arteries through Dnipro in the south are unpassable for Russian heavy vehicles, trying to cut off any kind of resupply and reinforcement to these regions. This is the Antonovsky Bridge. Oh, doesn't look like there's any sound with this one. But the Antonovsky Bridge is getting lit up yet again. Keep in mind they're trying to pontoon across this thing. Rooster says, I'm impressed with the accuracy of HIMARS. HIMARS are actually accurate with up to and including 1 meter of their intended target. And that's public knowledge, believe it or not. HIMARS are stupid accurate. They will hit something up to and including 1 meter of their target. Meaning, it would hit from me to pretty much my camera. Guaranteed. That's how accurate HIMARS are. So there's no, like, you don't run from HIMARS, okay? HIMARS will clock strikes and you're done. And he said, John Scott says HIMARS, HIMAR definitely made big difference. Yeah, HIMARS were the game changer in this war. You can see this. This is not usable. There's nobody who's going to drive a tank across this. Like, because this thing will collapse 100%. Like, I don't need to be an engineer to go to tell you, like, wow, that's bad. that not good. Yeah, probably not, bud. And they don't have to completely collapse it. We're really I'd say the one thing we're better at as human beings than killing each other essentially is building bridges. It's very hard to blow something up that we purposely engineer to ensure it doesn't fall down. So you don't have to blow up an entire section, though. You just have to make it to where it's no longer structurally stable enough to support enough weight or to be usable. And the Russians are resorting to having to just use the they have like a ferry. They've been trying to pontoon across the Dnipro River. That doesn't work because the Dnipro River is too fast flowing. And, of course, the Ukrainians are also striking the Antonov. This is, like, the first couple times I was like, okay, they're double tapping it. Now it's just, they're just making sure. Like, you start, I guess it's one of those things, like, if they have an extra missile lying around after they get done with another fire mission, they're like, yeah, just hit the bridge again. You always start an engagement with a fresh magazine. Delta Aviation 23 asks, are HIMARS dumb rockets still used? My understanding is no. Now, I've worked with HIMARS before, and I've never seen HIMARS use dumb rockets before. I've never seen them use the standard rockets, and I'm not quite sure if there's even have any in stock anymore. All of the ones I've ever seen used were precision munitions. And those have different variants and different ranges, obviously, not to go into too much detail on them. Not that I could. I've never worked HIMARS before. I've just had to call them in. So, but yes. But no, we don't use dumb rockets anymore. As we move over here into Kherson, a major strike has occurred just outside of Kherson. According to locals at this point, what we're hearing is that these reportedly struck and completely destroyed a Russian headquarters. So we can go ahead and take a look at this. And so that is reportedly a Russian headquarters that was destroyed. And now I can start kind of backtracking you back into kind of the south. And the reason why is when the offensive opened up, what ended up happening was the scramble. The Russian forces were not expecting this much of a breakthrough, and I don't think the Ukrainians truly were either. It seems that, in my opinion, and I don't understand what's going on the ground entirely, please keep this in mind, it's a grain of salt and an opinion, but I don't think the Ukrainians were expecting that much of a gain that fast. It seems like they were expecting a much more tough battle to gain a very little amount of ground, and all of a sudden they break through Russian lines and the Russians running like hell. As a result of this, the Russians scrambled basically their entire helicopter gunship fleet out of Crimea and sent them to respond at that night. And it sent them to respond and provide close air support for the retreating Russian forces and Russian forces that are still trying to hold the line, even though their flanks are no longer secure and there's no units sitting on them to keep them secure. And we actually have some footage coming from that. They sent out reportedly Ka-52 Alligators, Mi-28s, Mi-24 Hind gunships, and Mi-8s AMTSHs, which is their gunship version of the Mi-8 transport helicopter up to the Kherson Oblast. So here's some video footage of those helicopters en route up to Kherson. And these things were apparently all staged on a tarmac. They apparently had basically emptied out the air bases there inside of Crimea. We do also have the understanding that there was a field helicopter base near Chaplinka, which is down here on the southern part of the Kherson Oblast. But basically, the Russians are at this point are completely cut off on the northern part of the Dnipro River from their main resupply routes, reinforcements, and any assistance they can get other than close air support. Which is extremely dangerous considering that the Ukrainians have proven very effective. They're also cut off into two separate areas. You have the northeastern part of the northeastern part of the Kherson Oblast, and you also have the southeastern, because they hit this bridge right here, which is the report from today. This is the E58 bridge over, I believe it's the E58 bridge here in Dorivka. Donbass FPS asks, did any of them get shot down? I do not know. We do not have any information on that to be able to tell you. I would assume that there were at least some attempted shoot downs, but they did send quite a number of close air support aircraft, rotor wing aircraft at least, to support these forces. However, it's a very complex situation that I don't think anyone was quite prepared for. I don't know if the Ukrainians kind of overran their objectives by quite a large margin or not. I don't know a whole lot about what happened in this area. So, but my understanding, we haven't heard any reports of a down TLO of any type, and so we're just going to go with no, or we don't know. I think is probably the better answer. We just don't know. It's not the only thing. We see that Russian equipment is on its way from Crimea to Kherson as they are trying to rush troops up to this area. And even though they probably don't have a way to really truly get them across, their only crossing point is here at the Antonovsky Bridge, where they have a ferry in place to move them across the Dnipro River via ferry. However, much like we saw during the Battle of Severodonetsk, at the Battle of Severodonetsk, when the three bridges were completely destroyed up here between Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, the Ukrainians attempted to use a ferrying system to get troops and supplies across the river and their wounded back across the river. But it wasn't very long after that, I would say within about 72 hours, that Severodonetsk basically fell and they retreated back to Lysychansk because you could not sustain that. The Russians are pretty much in the exact same predicament, except they have a motorized ferry. But when you're talking about this much area, this many troops that they need to reinforce, resupply, take out the wounded, they have to feed these people. Like, you have to fuel vehicles. They have to get new vehicles up there to reinforce these military, to reinforce the losses that they have taken with military structure. It's just, or military equipment like that. That's kind of what you're seeing here. It's not sustainable. It's not tactically viable. It's too much of a choke point. It's too much of a weakness, and you're not able to. So really, all Ukraine has to do is wait the Russians out and continue to grind them down, and to the point they either start surrendering in mass or are completely and totally destroyed. For all intents and purposes, the Russians are between a rock and a hard place with nowhere to go. And they're essentially have been completely encircled. If their backs are against the river, and the Ukrainians are in front of them. Delta Aviation 23 says, could they use the IL-76 transportation plane? They could, but it wouldn't be viable. Their only main landing strip would be over here at the KHERSON International Airport, which has been cratered and completely and utterly destroyed time and time again. As we continue to just get footage from them blowing this thing up just constant. The Russians just keep using it as a base, and they keep hitting it with every artillery, because all of the Ukrainian artillery is pretty much within range of this now. Not even just the HIMARS. The HIMARS help for accuracy. This entire facility is just getting bombed constantly. I'm sorry, Sepcox. I'm sorry if I ruined that name. I'm not very good at pronunciation. Said, how far did the front move? We don't know. The front seems to have been pushed back quite significantly. That's kind of where we're at. The breakthrough is at Davidi Brid, which is over here along the Inhulets River. That's our understanding, is that this is where the breakthrough occurred. And that's where the 109th Mechanized Rifle Regiment, or Motorized Rifle Regiment of the DPR, was basically broken, and the VDV left them. The information since yesterday has really slowed down, and a lot of that is due to a lot of talk about, hey, this is operational security, please don't tell where the Ukrainian troops are, even if you're getting this information, please don't say that. We're attributing a lot to that, because about the same time that those started coming out is pretty much where we're here, pretty much when we see a lot of cutoff on a lot of this information. They also ask, did it move 6 kilometers or 11 kilometers? Because there's a lot of guessing. I'm just going to go with I don't know, because that's the honest truth. I don't know. There's not enough information to tell us. We're not seeing any live footage. We're not getting any photographs or getting any video footage of them in certain villages that we can geolocate. So I have not changed the map other than to reflect some kind of a breakthrough near Davidid or Davidiv Breed. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not going to try and play the guessing game, because there's not enough information to even try to make a coherent guess. There's not even a good guess that I can tell you, because I don't know the size and scope of the operation in its totality. John Scott says next couple of days to be able to work out what's happening. Yeah, a lot of this stuff right now is going to come out anywhere from 24 to 72 hours after the fact. So you're going to have to just kind of deal with that lack of information, and we'll try and piece things together as they become more and more clear over time. But there is going to be quite a significant delay to, I'd say, quite a bit of this information. So just bear with that. It's normal when it comes to these very fluid combat situations, especially with something as major as this. Now, I will say that the Ministry of Defense, or the Ministry of Intelligence for the United Kingdom, it did also say that, as well as several other officials in different locations, usually anonymously, stated that the Ukrainians were shaping the battle space, which is terms for they are setting up conditions, they are preparing for the main offensive. I don't know how true that is or not, but it would seem otherwise. A hypothetical question, once again from Sepcox says, do you think that retaking Kherson, will Ukraine push south, or will they move to the Zaporizhzhia front? I believe they will move to the Zaporizhzhia front, in my humble opinion. That opinion being based off of a couple of different things. One, we do know they want to retake Crimea, but to cross the Dnipro River to try and push further south doesn't seem advantageous to me. It seems like it's a logistical nightmare. It seems like it's purposely bottlenecking and putting yourself into choke points that you don't need to. And truthfully, you could use minimal troops within the Kherson region. Once you retake north of the Dnipro River, you bring it up to the river, and then you stop. Don't bother rebuilding the bridges or anything, and you can use a very relatively minimal amount of troops, ground troops, in this region, because the bridges will be destroyed. They are destroyed, so you don't have to worry about them crossing back over. So you don't have to have a lot of forces in this region to defend it. It wouldn't take a lot. And that frees up pretty much all of these forces that have been stuck in the Mykolaiv and the Kherson Oblast to move over into the other part of this country, the other part of the river, go across the Dnipro into the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, into the Donetsk Oblast, and really you could squeeze out the Russians here and basically split them down the middle. The Russians are on this side. The Russians are over by Crimea. You just can split them down the middle, close up this area, and then just do a full push south and into Crimea. Because once you get into this area, it's very flat, very open terrain. It's very hard to set up a defensive position worthwhile. It's very difficult to defend, and the Russians are basically going to get pushed back into kind of the more hilly and mountainous regions within Crimea before they really have the ability to put in any defending positions, and we know they're not trying to solidify those. I think the next big target will be Mariuple. I don't think so. I mean, it's a possibility, but I don't think so. I think actually the next big target would probably be Mariuple, if not Donetsk itself. Mariuple makes sense, but you already have kind of a bulge that happened up here near Mariuple and everything else a little bit earlier on, and then you can push south to Mariuple. It's a big propaganda win to retake Mariuple. It's a big win for humanitarian aid community, and it's also I think it's probably a little bit of a shorter distance for them, because if I take a look, based off of my map anyway, if I take a look here, going to Mariuple, it is about 40 miles. Take about 40 to 45 miles. And that is coming from, we'll do from Allanivka, which we know is the last checkpoint of the Russian Federation before entering Ukrainian lines. And that is, if I can scroll down here, from Allanivka, which is the last checkpoint, to Mariuple is about 40 to 45 miles. Okay? Now, if you go from, say, Volodar, which we know is in Ukrainian hands last we had checked, because there was some quite significant fighting on there. Oh, I guess it's about the same. A little bit longer, actually. Okay, very well. Well, all right, so I guess Mariuple is the better target. I just never checked it out like that, so very well. However you wish to agree. I'll go with that. But as I was saying, here are Russian this is Russian troops that are rushing up here to the front to try and reinforce, even though they have no way across the bridge. You can see, first of all, it's mostly material. You're seeing a lot of these appear to be, I want to say these are BMDs. And of course you have logistical vehicles. And the Russian Federation, they keep replacing equipment, but something you don't see a lot of is manpower. And that's because Russia is having a serious manpower issue. As we jump down here, by the way, pillaging is a war crime under the Fourth Geneva Convention. I don't know if you knew that. And what we see here is it's just a full thing of stolen grain on its way through Crimea and to Russia. Once again, pillaging is a war crime. And there's no way that this is just, like, you can't get these kind of convoys and it's just like a small group of soldiers, right? Where they're, battlefield bad companying it all the way to Russia with a bunch of grain. Like, that's not happening. This has to be facilitated by the state, which kind of backs that whole crimes against humanity, genocide, and ethnic cleansing rhetoric that we're hearing from Ukraine. It definitely leans into that category. We're talking about something that is this facilitated. especially when you're talking about pillaging facilitated like this, which is very obviously a war crime that moves into crimes against humanity territory. Take a look.
Ну все, ребята, таможню мы прошли, простояли 2,5 часа. Можете посмотреть, какая здесь очередь. Когда мы заезжали, она была меньше.
25 машин мы считали. Мы были 25-е.
Мы когда заезжали, были 25-е, а сейчас машин намного больше. Хотя, в принципе, вот они уже закончились, остались одни зерновозы. Но пропускная способность сегодня что-то была похуже. Или ребята устали, или не знаю, что случилось. Ну, все. Знаете как, отдых отдыхом, отдыхать хорошо, приятно, путешествовать. Но Мелитополь родной есть Мелитополь. Все. Всем привет, до свидания. Ну все, ребята, таможню.
Okay, and that allows us to kind of pull out of Crimea. So, as you can see, that's heavily facilitated. That has to be facilitated by the state. There's no way that could happen without government interference. Once again, pillaging is a war crime. Doing it on that level is a crime against humanity. Subcox asks once again, if South counteroffensive fails, what's next? I do not believe it will fail. Wow. That's a hard one. If it fails, realistically, my expectations don't go really past. They take and hold some ground, and then we wait for the next one. I don't think this is going to be a one-shot deal. It certainly could be. I mean, you could have that Hail Mary here from the Ukrainians, and they just sweep the entire north part of the Dnipro Oblast. But the Russians have spent so much time here building up a defense in depth that I think it's going to be very difficult to take it all in one sweep anyway. So I don't think it's going to be a failure. I think it's going to be more taking bites out of the pie. And, if it's a total failure, then you're not really going to see a lot of, I'd say, probably big difference in change other than a lack of ability to really have an opportunity to conduct another counteroffensive because of troop losses and equipment losses. It takes a lot of time to concentrate forces like this and to come up with a battle plan like this. And if you fail, outright completely fail, then the Russians don't have the capability really to dig in and resupply any more than they already are. They are at their best right now that they probably can be inside of the Kherson region for probably the duration of the rest of the war. There's no real sustainable way for them to resupply or reinforce. So yeah, it would basically turn into a long stalemate. You're just not going to see if it fails outright, the Ukrainians just won't be able to conduct another large-scale counteroffensive in the Kherson Oblast. They simply wouldn't have the troops or equipment to do it again for at least a while, if ever. That's pretty much what it would boil down to. Ultimately, I don't think it will come to that. I think it will be kind of a mix of both. I think they're going to take some bites out of the pie. Why is this all Russian frozen assets should be used for the reconstruction and punitive damage? That's going to come after the war. Punitive damages, reconstruction. You can't rebuild something while it's being bombed. So that's kind of where that lies, I think. And also the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, or the ICJ, if you prefer, the International Court of Justice, which is under the Rome Statute, still hasn't made any rulings or even really started the process outside of collecting evidence and having independent investigations. So that's kind of where those punitive damages have to come in. Jump over here to the Mykolaiv Oblast, and what we see is out of Mykolaiv, there's been quite a significant amount of shelling, unfortunately. Quote, the Russian aggressors fired missiles at the city of Mykolaiv on August the 29th. 2 people were killed, 24 citizens were injured. Local residential buildings and educational establishments were damaged. And that's coming from Alexander Sienkiewicz, who is the mayor of Mykolaiv. You can see the absolute destruction of this house. The individual within this house, this guy's house, there's a video of him online. He was in his house, him and his wife. His wife was killed in the blast, and he said in his interview with a local reporter there that that she was totally unrecognizable. Another UAV was shot down here. This is coming from Vladislav Nazarov, who's the spokesman of the Operational Command South. Quote, the Armed Forces of Ukraine shot down a Russian UAV in the Odessa region on August 30th. That brings us to Odessa, where 3 more ships have left Odessa. Quote, on August 29th, 3 more ships with Ukrainian agricultural products left the ports of Odessa through the grain corridor. And that's coming from the official Twitter account of the Turkish Ministry of National Defense. And our last big point out of Ukraine here comes another drone down. This is a Ukrainian soldier there on Snake Island who is currently using his manpad to fire at Russian drones that are located within the area. Some more manpad usage, still effective as ever. And that is them using the Igla manpad system. But that's actually all of the points inside of Ukraine. Now, there is still a ton of news outside of Ukraine, and a lot of it has to deal with the country. So please bear with us here, but that's everything inside the country itself. And as we get ready to roll here into the international news, we'll start having some other stuff happening as well. And the first thing we start off with is we actually don't go to Russia first. We actually go up here. This is in Borisov, which is in Belarus, and a lot of armored equipment, specifically tanks, was spotted being brought through Borisov on flatbed rail cars here inside the nation of Belarus. Just take a look.
Ебать его в рот, сколько танков. Борисов, везу танки с танкостроительного завода. Борисов, 149-й танковый завод. Беларусь, Борисов.
So a lot of tanks being brought in through Belarus, or a lot of tanks on the move there inside of the country of Belarus. Kind of bounce around Russia here a little bit. Belgorod has received several explosions, both last night with some confirmed reports, and also tonight with unconfirmed reports of explosions with no visual confirmation at this point. But what we're seeing is that this has caused quite some panic there in Belgorod amidst recent events, creating lines of the train outside of the city.
15 минут, вот, наверное, как момент. До этого проходили, а потом это, я не знаю,
You can see that that's some pretty good incoming fire there. And this is what we have regarding tonight. So no visual confirmation, but it would appear that we have some audio confirmation coming out of Belgorod right now of some explosions ongoing. Versus Sideburn says a shooting star. It's a star, all right. And an interesting thing regarding Ukraine. So the newest head of the Kherson region, the occupied Kherson region, their head, considering their last one was assassinated by partisans. Anyway, this new one was spotted making his announcement from a Hilton hotel here in Voronezh, Russia. Apparently, he's already fled, fearing spontaneous combustion. Huh. Very, very weird that he would be giving an address in Russia, being the head of the Kherson Oblast. That brings us up here, where in Moscow we have 6 different points tonight. The first one is that the last leader of the USSR, Mikhail Gorbachev, has officially passed away at the age of 91. Mikhail Gorbachev signals the end of an era, as he is the last leader of the Soviet Union. He suffered from a very prolonged illness, and though he's well known for helping bring down the Berlin Wall and ending the Cold War, he's pretty much despised in Russia for launching the economic perestroika, which is the restructuring, an effort to save the Soviet economic system, which ended up to the collapse of the USSR. Many public enterprises were privatized and divided among a few in power, creating oligarchy, increasing corruption, and food insecurity. He was also the Soviet leader in charge during the Chernobyl disaster. But yes, Gorbachev did officially pass away at the age of 91. And as we jump down here, treason. Journalist Ivan Sifronov is currently facing 24 years in prison if he's convicted in Russian court for treason. He was publishing articles about the military. And we're of course getting this from Reuters. This is once again crackdown on independent journalism within the country. See here, Putin met with the director of the Federal Service of the National Guard troops, Viktor Zolotov, here inside of Moscow. They discussed the performance during the special military operation within the Donbass. At this point, Putin did not appear to be very happy regarding what was going on. At this point, as we're getting ready to get into, military leaders are addressing Putin directly, and they are no longer going to Shoigu.
Гвардейцы выполняют задачи по охране важных государственных объектов информационной инфраструктуры, непосредственно коммуникационных инфраструктур, обеспечиваем гуманитарную безопасность, проведение грузов, сопровождение их. Также мы занимаемся медицинским обеспечением населения, непосредственно оказываем медицинскую помощь населению. Вот тот круг задач, который мы осуществляем. Я особо хочу подчеркнуть, что мы чувствуем поддержку населения на освобожденных территориях.
As you can see, Putin's really not. Putin, if he didn't have essentially Parkinson's at this point, from what we can best tell, he'd probably try to kill this guy. But he looks like he's about to reach over the table and like slam his head into like the corner of it or something. But unfortunately, he can't do that. So yeah, it's also being broadcasted live. Not that I don't think you could get away with it. Ukrainian media. According to the Russian media here regarding Ukraine, apparently Ukraine doesn't need a power plant. According to the Russian news agencies, which is regarding the fact that they're pretty much just a propaganda machine. It's scarily a propaganda machine. Anyway, they say that Ukraine is a medieval country like Haiti and shouldn't have any nuclear power stations in the first place. Take a look.
Западные страны говорят, что они снова опускают железный занавес. Не мы опускаем его, они пытаются опустить. И вот мы уже можем понимать, что остается с нашей стороны и что остается там. И мы видим сейчас фактически обезьяну с гранатой, которая пытается взорвать атомную станцию. Ну, господа, это фактически средневековая страна Украина, в которой почему-то еще осталась советская атомная станция из 20 века. Ну, это просто совершенно какое-то уже Гаити, где, как мы помним, Дювалье объявлял себя колдуном Вуду, Тантон Макуты ходили по улицам, и он говорил, что он руководит армией мертвых. Вот то же самое сейчас делает Зеленский.
I can only stand so much of that. So, anyway, there is the... anyway, yeah, so that is the Russian Federation. And that is their news. That is Russia One, which is a state-run media news agency. And, yeah, they're talking about how Ukraine is a medieval country that is still using a nuclear power plant that the Soviet Union built. The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, by the way. That collapsed in 1991. Anyway, the Russian... so, this is unbelievable. I've said it before, and I say it again, when it comes to the Russian government and the Russian military. Okay, I've said it time and time again when it comes to the Russian government and the Russian military. I don't hate the average Russian. I think people all over the world are cool. Like, I think that Russians are cool, Ukrainians are cool. I think, you know, the Chinese are cool, the Vietnamese are cool. Hell, the North Koreans are probably cool. They're just brainwashed. And most of them aren't really. They just have to follow things, or they just get executed. So it's a very small section of society that's actually a bunch of bad people. Fortunately, when there's 8 billion of us, that ends up being a lot of people. And the thing is that this is one of them. This is a Russian mercenary. He brought back a trophy skull of a Ukrainian soldier from the Azovstal, and he used it to make a speech about how Ukraine must be denazified. He believes that everyone who considers themselves Ukrainian must be killed. That is genocide, one. Because genocide, for those that may not know, genocide includes many things. And Russia uses it quite much like a checklist, as opposed to a list of shit you shouldn't do. And one of those things that you can commit genocide on is national lines. One country killing the entirety of a population of another just because they happen to be part of a separate nation is genocide. It does not have to deal with religion. It doesn't have to deal with, with a, ethnicity or anything like that. It is all about selecting a group of people of some type, whether that be religious, ethnic, political, national line, determining that they need to be exterminated for who they are. And that is what this guy is saying while holding the skull of someone that died in the Battle of Mariuple at the Azovstal. If you want to talk about denazifying a country, don't act like a Nazi. Just don't. There were times where taking skulls as a trophy was considered, while a little bit kind of gruesome, a thing. The 1st Marine Division has a Japanese skull that was bleached, and then they had it painted with the logo and everything else. It's a thing, and it's in a museum, and it's kind of gruesome. That was the 40s. Today is 2020. We know better. In fact, they stopped letting troops do that during World War II because it was horrendous. And they're like, what is wrong with you? In the Pacific Theater, where arguably some of the worst fighting took place of the entirety of the war. This is beyond screwed up. Just take a look. You don't have to believe me. Just take a look.
А вот этот чувак уже нет. Да, пусть горит в аду. Ему не повезло, из его черепа сделают кубок, возможно. Но наша война, она не просто война с людьми из крови и плоти. Наша война – это война с идеей. С идеей Украины как антирусского государства. Почему не может быть никакого примирения? Украина должна быть деукраинизирована. Русские земли Малороссии должны быть возвращены назад. Мы воюем не с людьми, мы воюем с идеей. Именно поэтому в этом трагедия украинских солдат, что мы воюем с идеей, поэтому нам насрать, сколько их надо убить и как их надо убить. Если бы мы воевали с людьми, мы могли бы с ними помириться, там сказать, да, братан, ну так получилось, короче, война. А мы воюем с идеей, поэтому все носители этой идеи должны быть уничтожены, так же, как вот этот чувачок, бедный Йорик, да, вот он, наверное, тоже хотел не валяться под Азовсталью, но просто выбрал не ту сторону. Это точно не мирняк? Нет, точно не мирняк, мы сами их ёбнули бы.
Как думаешь, он понял, что такое русский мир?
Я думаю, да, он понял, что такое русский мир.
Yep. 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 You can't make this shit up. You can't. It blows my mind every single day that I research and every single day that I report this. I think things couldn't possibly get worse. There's no way they're committing genocide. How much worse could it possibly get? And then I just see shit like this. If this doesn't make you angry, if this doesn't make you wonder, if this doesn't make you, if this is not appalling to you, if this isn't something, if you don't feel in some way, shape, or form one way or about this, then you need to go get help. On a serious note, like, mental health is important, okay? Mental health is important. Okay, we take Mondays off for mental health reasons because this war it takes a toll on you to research on this thing. It really does. Please don't do this yourself. This is why we do this new stream. It sucks if you're trying to look through all this stuff yourself. And a lot of what we see is blood and gore and very terrible, really depressing things. If this doesn't make you feel in one way or another, please go get help. You need to go get help. This is not something normal people can live with. This is not something a normal person should be able to watch, even no matter how violent you may have seen things. This is, as Ervis Chang just put it, totally devoid of humanity. I've seen some of the nasty work of the Islamic State. And not even the Islamic State did this. The Islamic State did not even do this. And I've seen the scratch marks in the walls of a torture prison cell in Syria. Think about that for just a moment. You cannot ponder the mentality. I understand war sucks, and sometimes to an extent I will say that there are some things that you wouldn't normally do. It changes you. And when you're there are things that you certainly wouldn't do in normal life, and there's certainly things that you wouldn't talk about or, think about if you were in normal civilian life when you're there on deployment. Things happen. It changes you. You're a different person when you're there. You don't cut somebody's head off, bleach it on a stake, bring it back and use it as a talking point for your genocidal mania. For your genocidal mania. You can't. You don't do that. This is exactly why here on the New News we say we try to remain unbiased. We try to remain apolitical. And we do on pretty much most topics. Ukraine, however, I cannot in any moral sense, I could not have a moral compass to support the Russian Federation. You must be devoid of understanding. You must lack a moral compass. You must many things. One way or another, that's okay. If you're on the fence, if you're like, it's a war, but it doesn't affect me, that's fine. But if you back the Russian Federation in their endeavors in Ukraine, I have no nice things to say to you because of stuff like this. Because while I may try and stay unbiased in many ways, including with Middle Eastern conflicts, I cannot be unbiased with Ukraine. This is too far. This is too much. This, if nothing else, this is the breaking point. I do not hate the Russian people. It's not the Russian people's fault. It's the Russian army. It's the Russian mercenaries. It's the Russian government. Hate them, but do not hate the actual people in Russia. They did not do this to Ukraine. As we move along here, like I said, Russian military officials are talking directly to Putin. They're no longer going through Shoigu because Shoigu appears to have been sidelined. According to the United Kingdom's Defense Intelligence Agency, also usually frequently referred to as MI6, they released a report on the 29th of August stating that Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu had been sidelined as a result of leadership failures during the war in Ukraine. Reportedly, military commanders reporting directly to Putin himself now, cutting out the middleman. And this is their official report here. Recent independent Russian media reports have claimed that due to the problems Russia is facing in its war against Ukraine, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu is now being sidelined within the Russian leadership, with operational commanders briefing President Putin directly on the course of the war. Russian officers and soldiers with first-hand experience of the war probably routinely ridicule Shoigu for his ineffectual and out-of-touch leadership as Russian progress is stalled. Shoigu has likely long struggled to overcome his reputation as lacking substantive military experience, as he spent most of his career in the construction sector of the Ministry of Emergency Services. First of all, sick burn, MI6, very sick burn. And two, this is who they're talking about. This is Sergei Shoigu. He is the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. And that is everything inside of Russia. Wow, that's a lot. And we jump up here over to Sweden. And before we do, Delta Aviation asks, what is Lend-Lease? Lend-Lease is an act. The Lend-Lease Act was initially put into place by the United States during World War II. And what it does is it allows the United States and its allies to draw on their stockpiles. So the United States will produce vehicles and weaponry and also give you oil and gas and diesel and raw materials, weapons, munitions, everything you need under the Lend-Lease Act. It's meant to basically be paid out. It's meant to be paid back to an extent, but it lowers the cost In many cases during World War II, the precedent was that in many ways you pay back for what you're being sent, but in many cases it was upwards of, in some cases, 99% discounted for the country it was being sent to. Ukraine is getting that same treatment. It's the first time since World War II that the Lend-Lease Act has actually been put in place. And up here in Sweden, the Swedish Prime Minister will provide further military aid to Ukraine. The Swedish Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, said on Monday Sweden would provide a further 500 million crowns, or $46.75 million in USD, in military assistance to Ukraine to help it defend itself against the Russian Federation. Andersson told reporters after hosting Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba for talks that her government will provide a total additional aid package of 1 billion crowns, both military and civil assistance to Ukraine. Here you get, and here we are. This is from the Swedish Prime Minister. Ervishing says, so after this change, basically talking about Sergei Shoigu, the war is still being, and if after this change the war is still stalled, then it should definitely be attributed to Putin. You can attribute pretty much everything. He's an authoritarian leader of a country. You can attribute everything to Putin. This war would have never happened if Putin wasn't in power. It never would have happened. Ever. You don't have to wait for Shoigu and the next guy to fail. You can just say Putin did it. And he's an authoritarian leader. We don't have to wait on that. We know it. We know who caused it. No waiting necessary. Here's a pretty crazy thing, though. This is outside of Berlin, reportedly. 660 kilograms worth of cocaine was found in a truck with bananas. In Germany, 660 kilograms, or 1,455 pounds, worth of cocaine worth 50 million euros were found in the back of a truck with bananas. The bananas were Colombia and were mistakenly delivered to the Grosskreutz plant, where the attentive supplier drew attention to blocks of white matter under the products. 40 emergency services in the city were involved in the investigation. This is a large amount of drugs ever seized in the city. I'm seeing Slava Ukraini. Hirium Slava. There you go. Yeah, that's a lot of cocaine. That's almost as, I think that's almost as much cocaine as was found in the coffee plant in Switzerland. I wonder if they taste tested this like they do in the movies. I'm pretty sure that's not a thing, though. I'm pretty sure they have drug kits for that, actually. I've never been a cop, so I don't know. So I'm just going to go with whatever Hollywood tells me. Otherwise, we jump down here where we finally move into Iraq, which is the next big topic that's happened over the last 48 hours. There's been a lot of violence in and around Baghdad, especially within the Green Zone, as well as other parts of Iraq as well, Basra. And what we see here is that basically supporters of Muqtada al-Sadr broke into the Green Zone in Baghdad, and they began fighting with the Badr organization and the Iraqi army. Representatives of the Sadr's movement surrounded a Republican palace within the Green Zone, from where the presidential apparatus was hastily evacuated and again occupied in the parliament building. Despite calls from government security forces to go home, sources report that the Sadr City district of Baghdad loudspeakers are calling for everyone to go to a rally in the Green Zone in order to defeat corrupt officials.
علينا وعمك عينه الموجود هناك وما يجي عسل عمك عينه هذول تزولمت منين
You can see them there inside the presidential building. Xenocide21 says, "Soldier, I'm good with cops effing suck." I said, well, to that I respond, I'm a Marine, not a soldier, but thank you anyway. Mustafa Al-Kazimi gave the order to disperse the Solderists in the green zone by force, after which government security forces opened fire on them and used tear gas. Reportedly, at least 30 people thus far have been killed, and as a result of the armed clashes there in Iraq, more than 700 people are injured. Among the victims, 110 security officials, according to the emergency services. Throughout the night and early into today, active clashes continue between militias and the country's security forces. It is also reported the fighting is still ongoing in there in Basra. In addition, there is unconfirmed information about the shelling of the U.S. Embassy complex in Baghdad. And as you can see here, fires raging throughout the city. This is something that we had covered in a little bit of a special stream that we ended up doing yesterday as well. The intensity of the fighting was quite significant inside of downtown Baghdad. It was very significant, in fact. And there are deaths of there are reports of deaths of members of the Iraqi special forces in the clashes. But the groups were fighting each other. The Badr organization, which is led by one of the members of the parliament, were fighting the Solderists. The Solderists were fighting the Badr organization. They're all fighting the Iraqi army. It's pretty bad. And the intensity of the fighting in Baghdad is only pretty much growing. The reports, at this point, it doesn't seem to be stopping. There is reportedly kind of a lull right now. As I was getting ready to come onto the stream, I'm hearing a little bit of a lull right now, but I can't confirm that. But the situation is very terrible. Muqtada al-Sadr, who is the one who really started this whole deal, and the thing is that the way he's in power, he's a Shia cleric, and he first of all fought against the United States. We've tried killing him several times. Muqtada al-Sadr, Rooster Sideburns calls it's what you call a mess. Yes, it's a mess. Muqtada al-Sadr has been around since the 2000s. He's in charge of the Mahdi Army, is what it's called. It's a Popular Mobilization Force, or PMF. And they fought against the Islamic State, so they're kind of backed by the government, but it's a militia. He is in charge, or basically he has a lot of influence over the poorer, large majority of the population in Baghdad that are of the Shia group. You know who else happens to be very Shia and very much supports Muqtada al-Sadr and does not like the Iraqi government? Iran. Iran highly supports Kataib Hezbollah and the Mahdi Army quite significantly. This is the Iranian influence in Iraq. Muqtada al-Sadr is the exact same individual. When we were at the U.S. Embassy in compound in Baghdad, they posted like a 6-floor tall poster across from us in an apartment building in the U.S. Embassy that was the giant head of Muqtada al-Sadr. Kid you not, it was a thing. It was a thing. In fact, I wonder here. I'm gonna go and see if I have anything. If I have my photos from this, maybe not. We'll see. Let's see. Deployment. No. I don't think I do. That's unfortunate. I might send those to you guys sometime. But anyway, yeah, so they basically have this giant poster. But this is the Iranian influence in Iraq. Iran and Saudi Arabia both kind of jockey for influence. A lot of that is along religious lines. Saudi Arabia is very Sunni, and Iran is very Shia. So that is kind of and Iran's also a theocracy, so they really have a lot of wants to have some influence over Iraq, and their opportunity really didn't open up until after Saddam Hussein was dead because of the Iran-Iraq war, which was extremely bloody. And that's kind of why you're seeing all these clashes happen, and why Muqtada al-Sadr is such a big deal. He called for the government to be dissolved and the parliament to be dissolved, claiming corruption. The entirety of the government, Supreme Court, President, and Parliament all told him to basically go F himself, and now his supporters are openly killing people in the streets.
كافي عمي كافي كافي كافي.
It's a terrible situation. It's a very terrible situation. As we jump over here, we jump up into what's the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is kind of the independent tribal regions of Pakistan, where 5 security officials were killed by the Islamic State within this area of Pakistan during the attacks in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region. 5 security officials were killed and several more were injured. Also, the Islamic State militants detonated an IED planted at a military checkpoint in the Bajar agency. During the explosion, 1 officer was mortally wounded and the second was hospitalized and is currently in intensive care. You get a little bit of some photos from this attack here. And that allows us to jump down here into Africa, where we have a couple of different developments. The first one is coming out of Ethiopia again, as fighting has once again flared up within the region of Ethiopia, specifically between the TPLF rebels and the federal forces of the government of Ethiopia. TPLF rebels are originally from the Tigray region. Fighting has opened back up, and what we are seeing is that the TPLF has announced that they captured the city of Weldia, which is actually down here. Recently, they had captured Kobo, which is up here to the north. And they are on a successful march. Right now, it looks like they are planning to launch an attack on the city of Dessie, just to the south, located down here. This is Dessie. And right now, which is about 200 kilometers to the south from which the road to the capital of Ethiopia actually opens up, the communists defeated the 22nd Division of the Ethiopian Armed Forces south of Kobo, after which they entered Vildia, and on the shoulders of the retreating troops captured more than 1,000 prisoners along the way. At the moment, the Ethiopian army has begun re-equipping existing Su-27 bombers with the aim of attacking large troop concentrations of the TPLF forces. UAVs in service do not have the necessary power for these purposes. They just can't carry enough ordnance. Those are the TPLF rebels for you there in Ethiopia. This has caused the already dire humanitarian situation within Ethiopia to become worse. It was already difficult enough to get humanitarian aid into the Tigray region of Ethiopia, and 90% of the people within the Tigray region actually require humanitarian assistance just to survive. Most of the Horn of Africa, including Djibouti, Eritrea, Somalia, and Ethiopia, are affected by the worst drought in the last 40 years. So the situation is only going from bad to worse. As you jump over here to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Islamic State has attacked locals here in the DRC, and they were reportedly targeting the military and Christians, resulting in the death of several dozen people, including military personnel, the seizure of weapons, the burning of houses and vehicles and other property as well. You see some of that here. The Islamic State does have quite a lot of power in Africa. In fact, at a conference in Morocco, the leading powers of the world, as well as the African Union, stated that the leading fight against the Islamic State is in Africa. It is no longer in the Middle East. Here in Africa, they simply don't have the same kind of support structure. Essentially, the Islamic State, in many ways, is as powerful as many of the local militaries. They have the numbers, they have the equipment, and they are conducting quite serious operations in many locations, such as Nigeria, such as Tanzania. You're seeing it in Burkina Faso. You're seeing it in Mali. You're seeing it here in the DRC. I mean, it's going from bad to worse in many locations, and there's not a whole lot the government can do to stop them, as they're quite on a one-on-one even footing. Speaking of Nigeria, as we jump up here, several Islamic State militants were actually killed during a Nigerian counterterrorism operation. The military personnel of the army liquidated several militants of the Islamic State. The operation took place on August the 29th in the state of Yobe. At the scene of the clash, security forces seized weapons, communications equipment, and motorcycles of the jihadists, which you can actually see here, so several bits of their equipment. And that's actually pretty much it for the depressing news, but of course, here at the new news, we try to end it on a good note, because we all kind of need uplifting stuff, or at least try and find something, if it's not good, at least interesting. And what we have for you today is kind of cool. And that's because the immortal, I believe it's the immortal jellyfish, essentially. Scientists have found clues here in Spain as to what makes the immortal jellyfish immortal. Scientists in Spain have unlocked the genetic code of the immortal jellyfish, a creature capable of repeatedly reverting into a juvenile state in hopes of unearthing the secret to their unique longevity. They found clues into human aging. In their study, they were able to map the genetic sequence of the Turritopsis dorni, which is the only known species of jellyfish able to repeatedly revert back into a larval stage after sexual reproduction. The study was aimed at understanding what made the jellyfish different by comparing the genetic sequence of the T. dorini to the Turritopsis rubra, which is a close genetic cousin that lacks the ability to rejuvenate after sexual reproduction. So basically, these things, they grow up, they mature, they have sexual reproduction, and then after that, they go back to being babies again. They're immortal. Essentially, they're immortal. How? Well, apparently they have found some clues. If you want to read more, you can always read it there on Reuters too, on Reuters Science. So, by the way, these maps are openly available for you guys on our website. The links are below, as well as all of our social media links too. And you guys can go check them out. I add it before the stream every single day. But that's actually it for everything in the world right now. At least all of the stuff within our sources that we were able to cover. And that's all of the major news points over the last 48 hours. I hope that you guys enjoyed. And even if you didn't enjoy, because I know a lot of it's pretty depressing, I hope you found it at least knowledgeable. The main reason we're doing all of this is for charity. 100% of everything we do is for charity. We're doing this to help people. We are never we're never doing super chats on this channel. Ever. That's never happening. We're never doing merchandising. 100% of everything we do goes to charity. So please check out the description below. You're going to see a ton of links for a bunch of charity organizations. Please give them your support. Please give them, all your love and affection. If you can't give a lot to them, give a little. 80% or more of all the donations that they receive actually go to the programs and actually go to helping people. It's one of our requirements when we go through and we vet these organizations. If you can't give a lot, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's fine too. Please be sure to, at least help us grow the channel. The more people that come here and watch the news, of course, you get it from an independent source and get a little bit of a different spin on it. But the more people overall that are here, the more of an impact we'll have on these organizations and on people's lives throughout the world. We want to be able to be the news that gives back directly to the people affected by the crises we talk about every single night. And the only way we're able to do that is through you guys. So thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much for everything you guys have done for us. Please, if you have more organizations, because we cover the entirety of the world, if you have organizations, especially in areas that we don't have, please get onto our Discord, which the links down there, as well as our Facebook and Telegram and Twitter and everything else. and get in touch with the staff member. Shoot us a link and shoot us a short description of that on there. And we will start getting that vetting process through and hopefully be able to add it to the stream, especially if you have one that we don't, in an area that we don't cover. And please check out all of them. Don't just check out Ukraine. There's a lot of other terrible things going on. There's hundreds of millions of people right now that are in dire need of help, and not just in Ukraine. So please be sure to check out all of them. I know Ukraine is the hot topic, but we want to help out people in the less highlighted areas too. They need it just as much, if not more. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us. I hope that you guys have enjoyed and found it knowledgeable. I hope to see you guys once again tomorrow for another 24 hours of news and review on tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. Please be safe. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. I really don't want to be talking about you guys in any of these statistics. So with that, I hope you guys will be back tomorrow. I hope to see you guys in the community and on all the social media platforms that we have opened up for you guys. And thank you so much for the support. It's really crazy to think about how many people are here and how many people are here coming out every single night. So with that, my name is Paul from the New News. Have a great night, everybody. Slava Ukraini.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія довольно і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія довольно лахи і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям плечом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія довольно лахи і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your double lemon, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія довольно лахи і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Історія довольно лахи і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.